There has always been a rule in my house. You must leave at least one door or window open in any given room of the house whilst you are in it. It was drilled into me since I was old enough to reach for the door handle. I didn't understand why for a while. My parents usually weren't superstitious in the slightest. I even saw from pictures that they owned a black cat a while before I was born. I rarely, if ever, questioned them, though. My parents were kind, calm people, but if I ever came close to breaking the rules, or even asking too many questions, they would turn serious and wouldn't let me off without a 30-minute lecture first. I didn't actually believe in the superstition, thanks in part to them not telling me what the consequence would be for not doing so, but I didn't want to anger them, even if it meant leaving a window or door open in the cold. When I was 19 years old, however, my parents had gone to my grandmother's house to see my aunt, who was visiting from Australia. I quickly volunteered to watch over the house while they were gone, which seemed to make them happy. In reality, I was just using this as an opportunity to have my girlfriend of 6 years over. Anna's father didn't like me very much, so I wasn't in her house very often. My parents didn't allow guests, so we mostly saw each other at school. That weekend though, I invited her over and she arrived less than an hour after my parents had left. She knew about the rule, of course, but that was mostly from me venting about it to her. From her perspective, I probably just had weird parents. Maybe if she had taken it more seriously, or if I was more strict, then what happened next could have been prevented. After a while of watching movies, she went to use the bathroom, but 30 minutes later she still hadn't left. I began to grow worried, asking her if she was alright, and when I got no response, I opened the door. She wasn't inside. I looked around the room and realized that she must have closed the window while she was in there, and now she was gone. Not a great way to find out that the superstition was real, was it? Her disappearance was a big thing. Most people assumed that her father had killed her on account of him being a big, mean Russian guy who gave everyone death glares, as well as the fact that he frequently got into arguments with his daughter. The investigation turned up nothing, of course. I didn't say anything, but I think my parents suspected something. I joined the military not long after. I guess I just hated being in the house where she disappeared, and I somewhat harbored some resentment to my parents, and more so myself, for not being more strict with the rule. I wish I had stayed in contact with them, though. They died in a car crash last month. They left me the house, among other things. Yes, I hated it at the house, but it was big, and I hadn't had any great places to stay in the 5 years since I had left. I spent last night getting drunk. That's how I've spent a lot of nights since I got discharged. But being in the house where I lost Anna wasn't good for me, and I took to the drink especially hard last night. In my drunken state, I decided I'd reunite myself with her. I walked into the bathroom, closed the door and window. I immediately felt a wave of nausea, though not from the alcohol. Realizing what I'd done, I sobered up pretty quickly. I looked through the window to see that it was pitch black outside, despite the fact that the sun had only started to set when I had entered. When I opened the door, I stepped inside the kitchen, but that wasn't right. The bathroom was located near the front of the house. The door slammed shut behind me, but when I opened it, I was in my upstairs bedroom, then my living room, then my basement, then the guest bedroom. It's like my house, but wrong. It's a maze of every room and story, but in the wrong places. I'm writing this from the downstairs bathroom. I've found out that my phone is connected, but I'm not going to call for help. I don't want to risk anyone getting stuck in a hellish, distorted replica of the house like I'm in. There'd be no point anyway. I don't think I have long left. I hear eerie noises from the woods outside, but it's worse than that. I've just heard footsteps upstairs. I'm sure some of you are concerned for my safety after my last post. I think that now is the time to update everyone on what has happened since. Many of you in the comments suggested that the footsteps that I heard might be coming from Anna, so I set out looking for her not long after. It's strange, seeking out something in this maze. I'd step through a door into the kitchen, hearing footsteps upstairs. Then I'd walk through the door into the upstairs bathroom, seemingly hearing footsteps from the next room, only to end up in the attic and hear footsteps below me. As I made my way around the house, I began to notice some things. The house wasn't an exact replica of my own. The paint was fresher on the walls. The mirrors were cleaner. The carpets were different colors. Most noticeable of all, though, was that the radio and phone looked like they were from the 30s. I even saw a typewriter. Eventually, a little under 2 hours later, I stepped into the kitchen, and at last I was faced with Anna. "Eric, how are you here?" she asked. "The same way that you got here. How are you alive?" I responded, "As soon as you leave a room, it returns to its original state, as it was before you set foot in it. That's why the fridge always restocks itself." She explained, "No offense, Eric, but you look like you haven't slept in a while, or shaved." "Kind as ever," I replied, both of us laughing half-heartedly, still tense from the very nature of our current situation. "At least you put on some muscle. You used to be like a stick figure." She laughed again. "You look a bit different yourself. Your sense of fashion has changed a bit." She had changed a lot. Her hair, which I remembered as being shoulder length, was much longer now. She also appeared thinner and paler, probably from being inside this house for the last 5 years. More noticeably, however, was the fact that her outfit looked to be from the 1930s. "These are the best clothes I found in the wardrobe upstairs. They suit me." "No," she smiled sadly. "Eric, why are you here?" I guess I thought I'd save you, or at least end up being with you." I frowned. "Perhaps there is some way that you can save me," she said after a brief hesitation. She gestured to the window. Gazing at the trees, I noticed something strange. The branches seemed to be shifting every couple of seconds, appearing on different parts of the trees. Then, seconds later, the leaves would be orange, then green, then the tree would be bare of leaves. Then I saw something horrifying. A seemingly regular deer walked by the house, but after a couple of seconds, its antlers and legs were in the wrong place, then its eyes, then its entire head, all appearing on different parts of the body every few seconds, as the poor animal cried out in agony. I heard the same sound from deeper in the woods. Eventually, the deer returned to its regular state and ran deeper into the woods before its cries resumed. "What's happening to them?" I asked Anna. "The further they stray from the house, the more distorted they become," she said solemnly. "You said I could save you." "How?" "Eric, when I arrived here, I met someone about a month later. There was a woman, Delilah. She claimed to be a witch. I was skeptical, obviously, but seconds prior I had seen a deer with its hind legs protruding from its neck, so I figured I'd let her finish speaking. "Will you close with Caroline, your grandmother, on your father's side?" she asked me. She vanished when I was 5. Her mind had been going for some time at that point, but my parents always said I was her favorite. "Why?" "Delilah told me that when your grandmother's mind was going, she visited her, requesting her services. Caroline wanted to go back to her childhood." Anna proceeded to recite the story to me. "The spell was to feed off of my grandmother's memories and send her to a pocket dimension mimicking her childhood so that she wouldn't have to deal with the pains of her old age and failing mind. The plan was that she'd seal herself in her old room that night, disappear from this world, and wake up as a child in her 1930s pocket dimension." Delilah went to check up on her about 10 years after casting the spell. Apparently, she does the same for all clients. But when she visited the pocket dimension, she found Anna trapped inside. The pocket dimension had tried to draw on Caroline's fractured memories and ended up creating this distortion of her childhood home, constantly trying to replicate it. "Why didn't she stop it?" I asked Anna. "Delilah went to confront Caroline. She told me I'd be out in 10 minutes. She never came back." She responded, "Wait, my grandmother is here, in the house. That's why I think you can save me. Perhaps she'll recognize you and end this somehow. It's our best bet." She led me through the house, and after about 3 hours, we ended up in the upstairs hallway. I looked at the end, the entrance to my grandmother's old room. Anna and I braced ourselves and walked through the door. Sitting on the bed was my grandmother, as I remembered her, but a few seconds later it was a young girl, then a middle-aged woman, then a teenage girl, then my elderly grandmother once again. "Grandma, it's me, Eric." She stopped staring blankly ahead, then blinked a few times. She looked old and confused, but when she met my eyes, a look of realization dawned on her face. "Oh, Eric, you've gotten so big. Grandma, you need to stop this, please." She looked much more awake than before. "I can't go back. I'm close. If I can just get this right, I can go back to when it was easier." "I know, Grandma, but you've been sitting here, trying to recreate this for 18 years in the real world. Please, Grandma, just let it go. Let us go. You can rest." There were tears in her eyes. Then she slammed them shut, and I was faced with the skeleton lying down on the bed. Anna and I looked around to see that we were back in the real house, the real world. We hugged each other excitedly. She was crying. I buried Grandma Caroline in the backyard, outside the house. I think she would have liked that. The house isn't cursed anymore. Thankfully, Anna is understandably baffled at how much things have changed in the last 5 years, and she developed an interest in some real old-timey fashion. I think it might take her a while to adjust. I'm glad I was given an opportunity to save Anna and give my grandmother some peace. Even still, though, I hope I wasn't left anything else cursed in my inheritance. In my last post, I was certain that the curse on my house had been lifted. I think I might have jumped the gun on that. This morning when I went downstairs, I couldn't find the computer that I bought last week. I thought that maybe a burglary had happened while we were in the pocket dimension. I mean, it wouldn't exactly be difficult, considering that the windows and doors are usually left open. The television was still there, sure, but it probably wouldn't be a burglar's main priority. I mean, the thing is nearly 20 years old. But looking beside it, I saw my old PlayStation 3, but I had sold that years ago, around 2015, I think. I walked to the kitchen and saw that old radio that my mother had thrown out a decade ago. On the counter, I found the keys to the car that my father had sold a year before I moved out. Something was very wrong. I was suspicious at that point. I returned into the kitchen, emptied the contents of the fridge onto the floor, then left the room. When I opened the door again, the floor was clean and the fridge was full again. It had returned to its original state, as I had remembered it. It was then I put the pieces together. When my grandmother died, her pocket dimension didn't go away. We didn't even leave it. The spell is now drawing on my childhood memories instead of my grandmother's. The reason her house, and more so the world outside it, were so distorted is due to her failing memory. My memories of my childhood house are intact. Sure, even some parts of the surrounding forest that I used to play in, so that's why the house isn't constantly shifting and changing like last time. But the spell that caused this whole thing concentrates on memories of the home. The further away from the home, the more distorted the world of the pocket dimension becomes. And 15 minutes before, Anna said she was driving to town to buy some groceries. I rushed to my father's car and sped down the road. After a few minutes of driving, I began to hear the eerie noises from the woods that I had heard upon first entering the pocket dimensions, which I now knew were the cries of the distorted animals deep in the forest. Not long after, the trees began to distort, changing shape, height, and color in moments. Finally, after 10 minutes of driving, I saw it. In the distance, my mother's car, which Anna had taken, was being distorted. I stepped out of my car and heard it. Anna was screaming. She was trapped inside the vehicle and she was being distorted alongside it. I wanted to run over and pull her out of the vehicle, but I knew if I strayed any further, I'd become distorted too. With tears in my eyes, I drove back to the replica of my home and wrote this. There's not much battery left in my phone. When it dies, so does my connection to the world outside this nightmare. When my grandmother died, this spell, this curse, began drawing on my memories. Because I was the closest person inside the pocket dimension, I'm thinking that if I die, it will transfer to Anna and feed off of her memories. Instead, she will still be stuck in this hellhole. But from her screams, I'm certain that anything is better than the distortion she suffers now. It's the only solution I can think of, considering Delilah, the one who cast this spell in the first place, either got herself killed or gave up trying to end it. That is why this will be my final update. Goodbye.